Welcome to video 4.2 in this series of online support tutorials produced by Eskom Expo for young scientists. Let's take a look at some previous videos. In video 1, we helped you to identify the most appropriate category for your project. In video 2, we helped you identify and resolve potential ethics violations. In video 3, we helped you to identify variables in scientific investigation type projects. In video 4.1, we gave you an overview of materials and methods in research. In this video, we will take a closer look at materials and methods for each of the 4 types of projects. We will be asking what, where, and how the data will be collected. Let's start with quantitative studies. When doing quantitative studies, we need to ask, what method will be used to collect the data? What data will be collected? Go back to the aim of your research. What do you want to investigate? Your variables will tell you what data you need to collect. What materials will you need? Next, where will your research be conducted? How will the research be conducted? Which procedure will you follow? Which safety measures will you have to take? We will now use an example of a quantitative study to illustrate the materials and method to use. You want to conduct a scientific study of the foraging preferences of honeybees during summer in the Picket-Boerberg area. Worldwide, our food security depends on bee pollination. In the Picket-Boerberg area of the Western Cape, honeybees forage on deciduous fruit tree blossoms, but in the dry summer months, in the absence of deciduous fruit tree blossoms, which other flora are foraged by honeybees? The aim was to determine which flowers are preferred by honeybees in the absence of deciduous fruit tree blossoms. The independent variable is the various sites in the Picket-Boerberg area of the Western Cape. The dependent variables are the size, structure, and percentage of pollen in hives. For this scientific study, what method was used? What data was collected? What materials were required? And where was the study conducted? For our first question, using a descriptive study, pollen from various sites were collected to determine which flowers were visited. Next, the data collected was the structure, size, and percentage of pollen. Next, materials that were required included a full bee suit, a smoker with slow-burning pine needles, a compound microscope to identify pollen, precision balance to weigh the pollen, and a camera to record types of pollen and to photograph the research sites. Where was the study conducted? The farms Voorstervlei and Teerkloof on the Picket-Boerberg area in the Western Cape were used. Let's have a look at the method used. 3 beehives on each site were placed 10 meters apart on selected sites numbered A, B, and C. Between the summer of the 10th of January to the 30th of March 2017, pollen grains were collected from 9 hives fortnightly for 24 hours. Samples were again collected between the 21st of December 2017 to the 22nd of March 2018. A total of 54 pollen grain samples were harvested during these 2 periods. Flowering plants at each site were photographed and samples taken and pressed for future identification at a herbarium. Samples of pollen were extracted from the flowers, and slides were prepared for comparison with pollen from hives. Honeybees collecting pollen at flowering plants were observed and photographed. Pollen samples were sorted according to predetermined criteria, and safety precautions were taken. Notice that the method is described in detail. Some of the safety precautions taken were a full bee suit inclusive of headgear, boots, and gloves that were used for protection from bee stings during the harvesting. Next, a smoker with slowly burning pine needles was used to calm the bees. And then a labeled Ziploc bag, or rather many of them, were placed in airtight boxes in a freezer at -18 degrees Celsius to preserve the harvested pollen. When planning the materials and methods section for engineering projects, the following aspects need to be considered. What design criteria must your prototype meet? Do you have any performance goals for your prototype? Will you need to plan, design, and construct this prototype? Next, you must test, evaluate, and retest your prototype. You may need to go back to the drawing board to modify your prototype. Most engineering projects have several prototypes. Lastly, what safety precautions will you take? Our example engineering project aimed to improve the efficiency of solar photovoltaic panels by harnessing thermal energy. Most commercial solar photovoltaic panels convert only 13 to 20% of incoming solar energy to electrical energy, and the rest is reflected or lost as heat. This heat can be harnessed using a thermal collector. The engineering goal was to design and build a thermal collector to harness the thermal energy. This thermal collector needs to be lightweight, durable in moderate weather conditions, non-corrosive, cost-effective, and it must work with a solar panel. Can you write down the materials needed to build this prototype? Prototype 1, comprising of a front-cooled panel, was designed and built. Diagrams of the prototype must be accurate and contain sufficient details. You can include circuit diagrams, system drawings, technical plans, and drawing blueprints, etc. Provide a detailed step-by-step description of how the prototype was constructed or developed. The final prototype used a back-cooled thermal collector. This hybrid solar panel met the design criteria and had an overall efficiency output of 78%. For a computer science project, the three aspects that need to be considered are the programming language to be used, the development of the solution or the program, and how the solution or program is to be tested. The final prototype or final process that meets the design criteria and has the most desirable features must be presented. Let's take a look at these steps in detail. Number 1. Identify the programming language to be used and the design criteria to meet. Number 2. Develop the solution. Give a step-by-step description of your design. Use flow diagrams and other graphics to illustrate the computational design. Take into consideration the parameters, arguments, and features of the design. Step 3. Testing and evaluation. Test the program or solution and compare it with the design criteria. Evaluate the feasibility of your program or solution. The results can be presented as a diagram, table, or graph. For theoretical work, describe the theory or theories underpinning the ideas that you want to research. Describe how equations will be solved. Provide details of long derivations. If software is used to analyze data, mention the type of software used, for example, MATLAB. Identify any variables that may influence the data or results. That's all for our quantitative studies. Let's use a social sciences project as an example of qualitative research. When planning the materials and methods for a social sciences project, let's consider the following. What design will the study be? How will the data be collected? For example, will it be through interviews? Which instruments will you use to collect the data? Will it be a questionnaire, for example? Then, what will your sample be? For each of these questions, you must justify the choices you make. It will also be important to discuss the theories that will underpin your study. Refer to your research question when determining which method you will use to collect the data. What data do you want to collect? How will you collect the data? And which instruments will you use to collect and record that data? For observations, you can draw up an observation schedule to guide you with what to look for. Questionnaires can be used for surveys. Use an interview schedule when you're using interview questions to guide you. You can use focus group interviews too. Different instruments can be used to answer the same research question. This provides a way to cross-check the data and is called triangulation of data. A mixed methods approach includes both qualitative and quantitative approaches. For example, when studying the learning styles of students, you may want to add a pre and a post test, which requires quantitative data analysis. You will need to pilot or try out your instruments to check whether the items are actually answering the research question and whether it needs to be adjusted. Let's discuss samples in qualitative research by asking some questions. First, what will your sample be? For example, maybe you're taking grade 10 female learners from Valley View High School. Will your sample be representative of the entire population? In our example, yes, it will be representative of the female population of Valley View High School, but not other schools. Hence, the findings can only be generalized to those females in Valley View High School. What will your sample size be? For example, 120 female learners. Describe the sample in detail. How will the sample be selected? Will it be purposive, like the 120 learners in Valley View High School, or will it be a random by chance selection? For example, all male shoppers visiting a shopping center next Saturday. Think about how you will ensure your methods are valid and reliable. Validity refers to accuracy. How accurate are your results? Do your instruments measure what is intended to measure? You can use triangulation of different instruments here. Reliability refers to the consistency or repeatability of your study. If your study is repeated, will another researcher get similar results? How will you ensure this? How will the data be presented and analyzed? Will you use descriptions and themes or tables? Will you also use any statistical analysis? Remember the ethical issues that you need to consider in qualitative research, such as getting informed consent, maintaining confidentiality, and keeping the participants anonymous. Refer to video 2 on ethics in research. We hope that this video has helped you to understand the materials and methods for various types of projects. In our next video, we will cover the various ways to capture your results. Thank you.